please just post that you are clearly listening to the audio and stuff. So, hey guys, this is Varadarajan. I'm from Department of CSE, final year graduate at College of Engineering India, fellow colleague of yours. So, uh, let's wait for a few minutes till the other people could join the live so that we shall start by the topic of the day. So, in the meantime, if you find any difficulties in hearing the audio or if you find any difficulties with noise or something, please just post in the chat that is in the live stream so that we could know and make adjustments accordingly. Thank you. So yeah, hope everybody joined the live now. So we shall start. So I'll give an introduction about myself. So I'm a final year graduate at Department of CSE in CEG. So I've been working on blockchains since the last year since I've heard about it. So எனக்கு என்ன ரொம்ப what made me push towards this topic was I was hearing about bitcoins and stuff. So I started thinking like what is a bitcoin, what makes a bitcoin. So in my questions now I started getting, so I kind of started exploring in blockchains. So I won't say that I'm a expert in blockchains, but yes, I I kind of began with blockchain. So uh, it's not an easy or nor it is a tough task also. So uh, kind of you have to have more interest in exploring blockchain so that it keeps you going. So before we start, I'll tell the agenda for the day. So first we'll be seeing about the bitcoins in brief. Next, we'll be seeing about the fundamentals of the blockchains and its real-world applications and the scope for research in the context of blockchains. So finally, I'll give some context to how you can build a decentralized app, the application that is an outcome of a blockchain using the Ethereum blockchain. So I'll just give some context to how you can build your own app using blockchain. So that we could talk at the last. So before I start, I would like to thank Hariharan from Robotics Lab for helping me getting through all the process and giving me this opportunity to present a webinar. So with that, we'll be starting without any interruption now. So as I said earlier, we'll be seeing about Bitcoin. So uh, uh, it it is very useful that you must have heard the term Bitcoin because of its recent traction. So நம்ம பிட்காயின்ஸ் பத்தி ஒரு ஐடியாவில் இருப்போம் லைக் we know that Bitcoin and blockchain are very similar or very same or even people might think that Bitcoin is also a blockchain is also a Bitcoin and stuff. So I'll break the or I'll give the context of a Bitcoin and a blockchain. So blockchain is something that which is a technology like what is your C++ or or a C compiler does. Like it is a technology that can compile a particular language and produce the desired output. So blockchain is the technology, whereas Bitcoin is an application of the blockchain technology. So to state easily that Bitcoin is the familiar application of the blockchain. So so this is what the basic difference between Bitcoin and the blockchain. So you might have wondered that who created this or who is the CEO of the company or who is currently owning the blockchain company so that he'll be like the greatest person that you know, like maybe next to Sundar Pichai or somebody. So Mr. Satoshi Nakamoto actually originated the idea for the bitcoins through his research article called the famously called the white paper. So I'll say why he gave that idea or what inspired him to originate that idea later. But for now, Satoshi Nakamoto is not the any Japanese person that you can now think of. He's not actually a known person. Means that he's an anonymous identity. So he's the originator of the blockchain. So blockchain is not owned by any organization or a person or an individual or somebody else. It is the people who participate in the blockchain own their very own bitcoins. So like முதல்ல அதாவது people own the blockchain. So that is very basic thing that you must understand. So it happens the same with the Bitcoin also. So you might be wondering what is a Bitcoin or what is a cryptocurrency. So I'll say very easily. So Bitcoin is also similar to the credit or debit cards that we use for e-commerce these days. So it is very similar but not the same. So in a point that you can use Bitcoin for e-commerce and trading and whatnot. So the main idea that differentiates the Bitcoin from the traditional or the cashless economy nowadays, like the debit and credit cards, is that it is a decentralized digital currency, meaning that your very own Bitcoin lies with yourself. So whatever transaction that you make, it happens to be with yourself, but everybody knows that you are owning this amount of Bitcoin. So let me put it this easily. So your identity is not revealed, but you are assigned an address. So like some hash value or a random alphanumeric string, so that any transaction that you make falls under the particular block address, so that the chain of the blocks, say if I'm a participant in a Bitcoin and there are n more participants in the Bitcoin, everybody owns a ledger, so that every transaction made first is accounted on their very own ledger, and after verification it's been shared with everybody else. So that is the basic understanding of what is a Bitcoin. So what does Bitcoin do, or why should I use a Bitcoin rather using these traditional debit or credit cards? So what difference does it make? You might have these questions too. So uh, the debit or credit cards that we use actually must rely with these three companies. So I'm saying that these three companies are the famous ones. So PayPal, RuPay, Visa, Mastercard. You might have heard all these names. So what are they? Or who are they? What are they actually gonna do with your money or doing with your money? So what do they do is they provide the network for payment gateway. Say you might be a customer with a uh, different bank account, and the merchant may be with a different bank account, so that you want to transfer the money between the banks. So these network or payment service companies act as a gateway between those banks, connecting the dots or connecting the bridge, so that you can transfer the money very easily. So this is what it happens. So these Visa, Mastercard, PayPal, RuPay, all these companies are third parties that you make trust in, and uh, and you allow your money to be transacted through them. So what does Bitcoin do? As I've said earlier, Bitcoin is owned by nobody. So nobody actually has an hand in what you're transferring to whom, and nobody helps in actually doing that. So you eliminate the third party need for transacting Bitcoin. So this is what is most important that the Bitcoin does. So after that, it also provides additional what to say additional concerns, that it actually is very secure. So every transaction that you make, you can't force the transaction. So say if you're transacting through a debit or a credit card, it might happen that some hacker might hack the gateway that you are using, and sometimes some people would have experienced the loss of their money too. So it's very obvious. So in Bitcoins, nothing happens like that. So what actually happens is, you'll make a transaction request to the Bitcoin network. So say if X needs to send any Bitcoin to the Y. So what happens in the process is that, say the X wants to receive the Bitcoin from Y. Y makes a transaction request to the Bitcoin network, so that the Bitcoin network acknowledges Y with the unique or alphanumeric string of address. Say 256 bit key or 64 bit hexadecimal address or something like that. Yes. So these address will mean that whatever transaction that you make for the instance will be going through that address actually. So you are not exposed clearly, but yes, your identity will be maintained, so that if any request comes in the future, will reveal your identity. So what it does is, the Bitcoins that you transact will have a unique address associated with it, and you make a transaction request. So in the traditional debit or credit card, it so happens that if you make a transaction request, suddenly the payment gateway starts working for some time, and immediately you just receive the payment confirmation from the merchant bank or the merchant. So but what does money how does money being actually transferred. So after a long time, batch of money will be sent from this bank to that, or something like that will happen. So that's not what we are talking here. So in Bitcoins, what you do is you'll make a transaction request, so that your transaction request is timestamped, and there are certain people called miners. What do they do is actually, so your transaction request will be digitally signed with your private key. So you must know what is digitally signing, or what does digital signing scheme mean. So நம்ம எல்லாருக்குமே we might have heard about the word encryption. So what encryption does is, if you want to cipher or encode a text, you will impose some key on it. You will impose a mathematical function that will be used to cipher the key and the input text, and will be sent to the user, so that no intermediary will actually be able to track what is your actual message. So this is what it happens. um, in encryption it happens so that, so encryption you will find a private key which lies with yourself, and a public key with everybody else. So what it happens is, um, you'll use your public key to, as you see here in this encryption part, you'll use your public key to cipher the text, and the receiver, who knows the private key of yours, would be able to crack it. So this is a very tedious type of ciphering the text. So digital signature is something else. So digital signature na enna, you will sign your message with your private key. So public key இருக்கிறவங்க என்ன பண்ணுவாங்க, what do they do? So they can be able to acknowledge that you have ciphered this text, or you have ciphered this particular message அப்படின்றத they can acknowledge, because they know your public key. So this is what happens with the digital signature scheme. So what do these miners do? Coming back to the miners, what do they actually do? So they kind of collect your address and form blocks of transactions. Say like these that you have here. Your hash value combined with the previous block's hash value and a nonce. So nonce is something like a random number or a pseudo random text or something like that, so that each block gets a new identity. Adhanala, there is a part called the nonce. So what do the miners do is, they actually solve a very critical problem, or say a mathematical problem, to identify what is your public key that you have used. So இத வந்து they'll be able to, or they'll be decoding what you're trying to do. So not the exact transaction details, but your address, to verify that it's you, that you make the transaction. So this is what it happens in the intermediary. So இதுக்கு வந்து it's not a simple process. Hearing that may be easy, but what it happens is, yeah, the miner has to solve the problem just by guessing. So it's not that easy to guess a random number with 256 bits of values. So what do? Is they use supercomputers, master servers with large computing power, expensive computing power even. So அந்த மாதிரி பெரிய சூப்பர் கம்ப்யூட்டர்ஸ்லாம் வச்சு they'll try to solve the problem. So what happens is, when they try to solve the problem, um, they'll be, if they complete finding your key, your transaction will get approved. So for this entire process, it will be taking 10 minutes to 1 hour in an average. So in the transaction meantime it will be happening. So they'll mine with very specific hardwares and softwares. So they'll be getting rewards for what they are doing. So they'll be allowed to create a new block, or they'll be rewarded with some part of a Bitcoin. So this is what happens with miners. So when miners actually verify your identity that you are transacting the particular amount, the transaction gets approved, and the receiver receives the part of the Bitcoin that you are actually sending. So this is a whole long process. So இவ்வளோ செக்யூரா இருக்கிறதுனால தான் Bitcoin is called a cryptocurrency and it's being ciphered and stuffs like that. So apart from this, Bitcoin is also an advantage because most of the people, I could say many of the people have started accepting Bitcoin as a payment nowadays. Say certain e-commerce sites like Open Bazaar and equity trading sites. I don't remember the names exactly, but they have started accepting bitcoins as their as their price for commodity or something like that. Yes, so that is an advantage, and the most important thing associated with the Bitcoin is that it is open source, meaning that you can view the code of the Bitcoin, you can actually own a Bitcoin. So it is very open source that you could be able to find how Bitcoin works. So இதெல்லாம் தான் the most important advantages that Bitcoin provides. So apart from these, um, little more few words on Bitcoin. That so as we have known that the Bitcoins exist as long as the users exist in the system. uh, it is very trivial that if you start participating in a Bitcoin, you own a Bitcoin, you own some part of a Bitcoin, some 0.0001% of a Bitcoin. You are all in the environment. So uh, once you once you stop owning the Bitcoins, you actually get out of the environment. So this is what it happens. So if the users in the environment exist completely, or even say partially, one user or two user, till that point blockchain Bitcoin is a trivial system. So it exists till the users exist. அதுதான் வந்து it's most important. So you might be wondering that what is the price of a Bitcoin, how can I buy it and stuff. You can buy the Bitcoin in the website. So what is the price of a Bitcoin? Yeah, இது வந்து it is a very non-trivial question. ஏன் நான் சொல்லுவேன்னா, because the price of a Bitcoin today is some $9,500 or something, but it was around $20,000, 20,000 US dollars in late 2017. So the price of the Bitcoin keeps on changing. So what influences the price of the Bitcoin? ரொம்ப இம்பார்ட்டன்டான ஸ்டெப் என்னன்னா, சப்ளை அண்ட் டிமாண்ட். So if there is an excess supply and the demand is very less, so in that situation or the scenario, the Bitcoin loses its value. சே பிட்காயினோட வேல்யூ இன்னைக்கு 10,000 இருக்கு, அதுக்கப்புறம் நாளைக்கு எக்ஸஸ் சப்ளை கம்மி டிமாண்ட் இருந்துச்சுன்னா it will lose the significance, it will lose its significance. So the price of the Bitcoin automatically drops. So when there is a converse scenario, the price of the Bitcoin tends to increase. So இதுதான் வந்து the logic behind the varying price of Bitcoin. So this is what it happens. um, so you were all asking about risks that are involved in investing in Bitcoins. I have put few points. So the first and foremost point associated with risk is we have spoke about the varying price of the Bitcoin. So if you start owning Bitcoins through actually spending your money, say I'm spending 9,000 USD to buy my Bitcoin, um, it is no guarantee that tomorrow or day after tomorrow the Bitcoin price has to stay the same. So if you start using it as a Ponzi scheme, or something like equity trading or a share trading or something like that, so it'll end up in, maybe I won't say it might end up, so I can easily say like it might end up in incurring financial losses to you. So it shouldn't be trade. The purpose of a Bitcoin should immediately be made, or something like that. You don't plan a Bitcoin to be a trade stuff. So அந்த மாதிரி இருக்கணும். So since Bitcoin is not influenced by any person or a government or an organization, there is also a problem that there is no legally bounding regulations tying the Bitcoins to the society. So legal regulations இல்ல அப்படின்னா என்ன பிரச்சனை வரும் அப்படின்னா, so if there happens to be a tax evasion, say I'm using Bitcoin so that I'm hiding all my salary or a part of my earning in Bitcoin, it might give a chance for me to evade my taxes. So இதெல்லாமே வந்து serious problems associated with bitcoins. So anonymity is also a serious problem in bitcoin. So only at certain times the bitcoin acknowledges that person x and y who are transacting with each other. எக்ஸோட நேம் இது, ஒய்யோட நேம் வந்து இது அப்படின்றது எப்ப அக்னாலேஜ் ஆகும்னா சர்டைன் டைம்ஸ்ல தான், நாட் எவ்ரி டைம் தட் பிட்காயின் டிரான்சாக்ஷன் இஸ் பீங் மேட். So what happens is when users transact anonymously, there might be, I won't say that it's a trivial case, but there can be two mafias who from two other nations spending bitcoins or something like that. So transaction can happen that way too. So it may lead to anti-national interest also. So apart from these, I've said about miners. So miners வந்து their sole purpose is to verify your transaction. So இதுதான் வந்து their sole purpose. If say an organization is intended to mine bitcoins, they can buy extraordinary sources of power with so much of miners. So அந்த மாதிரி கேசஸ்ல என்ன ஆகும்னு பாத்தீங்கன்னா they'll want more of mining people. So say 51% of people who are mining the bitcoins are particularly belonging to an organization. So this huge influence of mining people would actually result in forgery or something. Can say if there is a genuine transaction, they can make it inaccurate also. So in the mari cases la kuda it can happen. So the block withholding is a condition where these kind of forgeries can happen by the miners community. So this is all to be avoided. So இந்த மாதிரி risks எல்லாம் இருக்கிறதுனால investing in bitcoin is a good thing, but I won't say too much investment would be a good thing. So you can try out bitcoins for a decent price and you can check on your own. That's what I can say. So stopping with the bitcoins, we shall move forward to the blockchain technology. I'm very much interested to tell you all these. So what is a blockchain? You can think that blockchain is a very new technology. It's only been thought in the last decade. I've said that 2010 was the primary ideology of a Bitcoin blockchain. So you can think that it is very new, but it isn't actually. So there is an island called Yap. So what the people lived in the island used before even 2000 or 3000 years was, they were using Ralstones, RAI. So what are those Ralstones is like the donut shaped structure that I've put here. So they approximately weigh more than 200 kg. So it's very hard for a person to lift the stone actually. So what happens is these Yap island people will use these Ralstones as a currency. So their trade was completely dependent on these Ralstones. Say we have heard about the barter systems. So it is something similar to the barter system. So people's cash were these rocks. So these rocks were used as cash for the commodity trading. So இந்த ராக்ஸ் வந்து ரொம்ப வெயிட்டா இருக்கறனால the security comes inherently. So the trade method was also different. So if there is a trade happening in the island, all the people would know that this particular rhinestone is a possession of somebody else. So either வந்து they are selling for some commodity or some whatever commodity. So if they are selling a part of the rhinestone or a complete rhinestone for this purpose, everybody will come to know that this rhinestone is transferred, the ownership of this particular rhinestone is transferred to somebody else. So the trade system was completely transparent and was easily accountable also. So this kind of cashless economy was a great idea that these people had known. So there is a surprise fact that even underwater rhinestones were also used for the trade. So they had a differently thought financial trading system even before 2000 or 3000 years, which is very weird. So coming to the components in the blockchain, uh, we all know that a node is a particular user or a computer who exists on the blockchain. So blockchain அப்படின்றது என்னன்னா, there will be a network of users. Similarly to the Bitcoin, there will be a network of huge users. Each of them will be called as a node. So ஒரு user they are a node on the blockchain. So what do they do is, they have an independent copy of the ledger which accounts for all the transactions that's being made in the blockchain. Say ipo there is a particular transaction, or I'll say transaction for the sake of easiness. So if there is a particular transaction being made, blockchain actually records the transaction and puts it into a block or a pool of transactions, so that it will be grouped and easily be accounted. So this kind of accounting happens only in the decentralized system. Say இப்போ நான் ஒரு user, I am paying somebody, or I'm doing something as a transaction with another person. Only I and the other person should know what is the transaction happening between us. But blockchain completely eradicates that. What it does is it maintains a ledger for every user, so that whenever the user makes a transaction, it records that particular transaction in the ledger of that user itself. அதுக்கப்புறமா whenever the other users comes online, the entire copy or the refreshed or updated copy of the records is being downloaded between the users. So harmony restore ஆயிடுச்சு. So அந்த மாதிரி it's a system that itself promotes harmony. So what all other things the node do? So node can be miners also. So people who are miners are also participating in the blockchain. So it can verify the authenticity of the other block of transactions that are made by other nodes. So in the mari kuda it can do. So the functions are the abilities of a node are these things that I've put here. So moving to the next slide, we were talking about ledger. So I've clearly put here what is a decentralized ledger. So you might be seeing it clearly. So you can see that there is a centralized ledger with a payment system connecting all the banks or all the users, all the nodes. So this payment system happens to be a very centralized one. Say if this payment system is something like a PayPal, it will know that all of your credentials, all of your transaction details, everything it knows. So there is a high risk that this particular company or a third party which influences your transaction might manipulate it also. So அப்படியே கான்ட்ராஸ்டா when it comes to the decentralized ledger, every node or every user have their own track of what is happening in the environment. So everybody has a ledger associated with them. So whenever there is a transaction that happens between two people, every ledger gets updated. So every ledger gets updated that these two have made the transaction. So everybody knows what is happening in the environment. So it is like, particularly you cannot force what has happened in a blockchain, or maybe for your understanding in a Bitcoin too. So you can't say that நான் வந்து யாருக்கோ பணம் கொடுத்துட்டேன் அப்படின்னு I can't lie also, and that person who received money from me cannot also lie. So this has never happened, and they can't say. So that is what the actual advantage of the ledger lies. So as I said earlier, ledger maintains the historical record of all the transactions. So these are decentralized records. What is immutability? So that is very important. So as everybody knows what has happened in the blockchain, it is very difficult, or I would say not possible, to manipulate the records that are being stored in the ledger. ஏன்னா இப்போ every ledger will have the transaction with the timestamp. So ஏதாச்சும் நம்ம force பண்ணோம் அப்படின்னு நினைச்சோம்னா every node in the computer, or say 90% of nodes in the computer should say that these transactions are not valid. அந்த மாதிரி சொல்றதுக்கு we have to manipulate so much of nodes in the computer, which is not at all possible. So that is what is called as immutability. So centralized ledgers are more prone to attacks. It is very easily known that because if there is a hacker pertaining to hack the centralized system, he'll be easily to manipulate the records in the system. But in case of a blockchain or a Bitcoin, it is not possible, as I've said earlier. So all these are advantages of the blockchain. So apart from the things that we have seen above, I was talking about a transaction. So what is the understanding of the transaction is, you can actually think that the transaction is the transfer of money between two people, easily like that. So it is very similar thing, but the transfer of money is the only thing that's being wrongly understood. So what transaction actually is that there is an event that happens to exchange a particular commodity, say whatever it is, an intellectual property right, or a certificate, or whatever it is, or a cryptocurrency, as you think. So what kind of commodity is not the important, not very important here. The transfer of commodity between two people at an instance is recorded as a transaction. So this is what transaction actually means. So what is a block? Block is a collection of the transactions that are happened using a node. So blocks store the information of all the transactions that have happened in a node. So what is a wallet? Wallet is something like what we own nowadays. So wallet keeps track of all the blocks that store these transactions. So the size of each block is around 1 MB. So whenever you make more transactions than 1 MB, I mean greater than 1 MB, so it so happens so that the other transaction gets stored in the next block. So all these blocks grouped together will be present as a wallet. So this is what a wallet is actually. So moving to the peer network. So we already understood that the blockchain functions like a chat messenger, so that there is no central party influencing the transfer or transaction between two individuals. So it happens that the 2 or 3 or whatever people transacting should be connected by themselves. So this is called as peer networking. So you might have heard this peer networking in the Bluetooth also. So Bluetooth share it, everything happens like two of the people connect and there is a transaction that happens. So this is the understanding of the peer network. Smart contracts. So smart contracts, if you are looking forward to blockchains, you must have studied about the smart contracts. Smart contracts na enna, these are automatically executing programs. So like scripts, shell scripts, you might have learned that in your UG. So automatically executing scripts that are triggered whenever there is a transaction happening between two people. So இதுதான் வந்து smart contracts. So these smart contracts are actually developed by engineers. So depending upon the use case that the blockchain solves, say என்னவா வேணாலும் இருக்கலாம். நம்ம cryptocurrency பார்த்த மாதிரி there is a e-voting system that is proposed by blockchain. So இந்த மாதிரி நிறைய applications, நிறைய use casesக்கு blockchain is being a solution. So அந்த மாதிரி different use casesக்கு it requires that different smart contracts are written on top of the blockchain, so that the transaction happens between two people as it is supposed to happen. So it's very easy. So what is a consensus? So as we have said earlier, this is the peer network involved in the transaction. Only that two people know what is actually a transaction. So and I've also said that every user existing in a blockchain agrees on a particular transaction record. So இது வந்து எப்படி it happens. So there is a particular algorithm called as a consensus algorithm which majorly influences the common agreement or a general agreement of the users existing in a blockchain. So say if I'm X and I've transacted a money to Y, everybody should know that I've transacted this particular amount to that person. So idhukkaga what happens is that everybody is sent a message that I've been, or everybody is sent the transaction history that I'm sending money to the other person. So everybody is sent the same transaction record. That is what consensus actually means. So after the transaction completes, everybody agrees on the same transaction record. So இதுதான் வந்து the consensus actually means. So moving on to the actors in the blockchain. So who are all participating in the blockchain is very important. So you can see that there are around 4 to 5 users happening to participate in the blockchain. We'll discuss who they are all. Architect is the person who designs how a blockchain should be. So நான் சொன்னேன் மாதிரி blockchain can solve many particular use cases. So depending upon the use case, there are different requirements. Say இப்போ வந்து intellectual property rights கூட blockchains are being used. So for an intellectual property to be safe in the blockchain, there is a different use case. So cryptocurrency is a different use case. Land registration is a different use case. மாதிரி நிறைய use casesக்கு architects actually design what is the flow of the blockchain. So they theoretically like draw diagrams or flow diagrams அந்த மாதிரி. So they do that stuff. Operator is the person who takes care of the networking in the blockchain. So whenever there is a node failure or something happens with the peers in the network, the operator will come to the rescue. So operator's role is that. Regulator. So we've heard of blockchains that it is open, everybody can participate. There is also there are also cases that only users of the blockchain are a particular organization. So say if Microsoft is planning to use blockchains internally for their very own purpose, அவங்க என்ன பண்ணிக்கலாம்னா they can make blockchain available in their very own network intranetல வச்சுட்டு they can assign the users the assign role to the users. So these regulators are the people are from an organization who influence the role of users participating in the blockchain. So developer na yarna people who actually write the code, say a smart contract, அது வந்து which influences the triggering of the transaction event. So how the rules that are to be followed to transaction to be happening. So இதெல்லாம் வந்து the role of the developer. So end user வந்து நம்ம தான். So the people who are utilizing the blockchain are called the end users. So these 5 people are the major actors in the blockchain. So moving on to the types, as I've already said, there are certain cases in which an organization happens to only use the blockchain. So those kind of particular very specific user constrained blockchains are private blockchains. Public blockchains na அப்படியே contrast, யார் வேணா participate பண்ணலாம். So anonymity of the users is preserved அந்த மாதிரி. So private blockchains na you are known so that this particular person is being operating the blockchain. So அதெல்லாம் தான் private blockchains. Permissionless blockchains is something that they do not authorize certain groups of users. Say நம்ம ஒரு company ஒரு organization இருந்தாலே ஒரு authority இருக்கும். So manager has to do some work, engineer has to do some work. There is a role that is associated with every designation. So these kind of roles and associations are called as permissions. Maybe called as permissions. So these blockchains that restrict the certain group of users to using certain facilities are called permission blockchains, and those that doesn't restrict are called as permissionless blockchains. So these are some of the examples that's being present. So we'll be discussing about Ethereum, which is a permissionless and public blockchain, as you can see here in the top right corner. So whereas you might have heard about this Hyperledger also, it is actually a different case. So it is a private and as well as a permission blockchain. Hyperledger Fabric is. So these are the differences that are observed in the observed as the types of the blockchains. So moving next. Uh, as I've said earlier, you might know how a blockchain actually looks like. So here in the diagram, you can see the words TA, TB, TC, and so on. So these are the elementary transactions that happen in the blockchain. So these transactions are hashed into particular keys, say random alphanumeric strings based on the hash. So whenever you give the transaction details to a mathematical function, they are getting hashed into h of A, h of B, and so on. So what happens with these Merkle trees is that all the transactions and its hash values are grouped together to one single hash value, so which is there at the top of the tree. So this is proposed by Ralph Merkle, who is a researcher who first proposed the idea of Merkle trees. What happens is that every transaction is hashed at first, and it happens to be like a binary tree where all the hashes are again hashed. So the say for instance this particular hash is found by adding the hash of these two transactions and then hashing that particular value. So it happens in a recursive and iterative way till the top of the tree. So the top node contains the hash which can represent all the transactions that are happened in these blockchains. Say transaction A, B, C, H, everything is represented as one single hash. So this particular hash is also mixed with the previous existing hash so that it forms a block like here. So this continues till the end. So if there is a block with ID 501, for the block ID 502, the hash of this particular 501 block and this 502 block ought to be combined. So there is one single entity, but it holds the entire transaction history. So that is what it happens with the chains of blocks. So what is the advantage with this single hash value? So you might be wondering. So simplified payment verification (SPV) is a method which actually helps you in verifying the transaction records. As I've said earlier, the miners verify the records of the transaction that are happening in the blockchain. So they don't have to ensure all of the transactions are in order or something like that. They only have to check the root value correctly so that all the transactions under the particular root value are authorized or verified. So this is what it happens. This is also called a simple payment verification. So this is an important application of the Merkle trees. So, but nowadays, in the blockchains like blockchain frameworks like Ethereum and Hyperledger and all, the more advanced keys are used. So for searching the transaction along the ways, there is a particular thing called as a trie or Patricia trees, even if you have heard about it. So what these Patricia trees actually do is they group words that are similar. So say if there is a word to and there is a word t, there happens to be only difference in the word second word o and e. So the path gets separated. Say it can even be so easy. So there are words t and 10. So what happens is these t and 10 exist along the same path but only differ by one word. So these are advanced search trees that can be used to search a transaction in a particular block. So these combined with the above said Merkle trees are used nowadays in the Ethereum frameworks. So these are the underlying data structures actually. So moving on to consensus, as I've said already, consensus is something that the users in a blockchain come to a particular agreement on how the blockchain or how the ledgers are getting decentralized ledgers maintain the same record throughout the process. So say அப்பவே சொன்ன மாதிரி when there are more people participating in the blockchain, there is a chance that any one person can manipulate his or her own record and force the uh, force the identity. So what happens is there is a particular mechanism called consensus which builds trust among the blockchain users. So this consensus helps in agreeing between the ledgers of multiple people. Say if I'm a person X holding a ledger L1 and there is a person Y holding a different ledger L2 that differs by just one transaction. Say my ledger holds a transaction of 100 bitcoins and that person holds a transaction of 1 bitcoin. So what happens is there is a disagreement between us two. So the consensus algorithm ensures that most of the people participating in the blockchain are of same ledger. Say if more people have ledger like mine, mine will be taken into consideration than the other person I have said earlier. Say 400 bitcoin என் ledger சொல்ற மாதிரி மத்தவங்களோட ledgerலயும் it's been recorded as 100 bitcoins அப்படின்னா the Bitcoin or the blockchain environment understands that this particular transaction has really happened, so that the other person who is having a different ledger will be demoted or his reputation will be lost. So that is the idea with how consensus works. So before moving on to what are the algorithms that are involved in consensus, the idea of consensus originated from something called as a Byzantine generals problem. I'll illustrate the problem easily. So what happens in that scenario is that when there is actually a country that is being surrounded by a group of 12 generals from the same army, there is a chance that some of the generals can be traitors to their very own nation also. So இந்த மாதிரி ப்ராப்ளம்ஸை எலிமினேட் பண்ணணும்னு what they actually do is they'll call all the 12 generals and take votes from each general whether to attack or not attack the country right now. So in மாதிரி upon the votes of those 12 generals, a decision will be made finally. So this is a simple consensus mechanism by which you can understand really about what consensus is trying to do. So moving on to the variety or various consensus mechanism involved in blockchains. First is the proof of work. As I've said already, miners compete to solve a cryptographical hash problem, which would help them actually verify the transactions that are being made in the block, and they also are being rewarded for their work. So this is called the proof of work. So they'll try to solve a particular hash value and they earn their reputation and blocks or bitcoins for that. So this is what it happens with the proof of work consensus. So by this way the verification is being made in the blockchain. Say there is a different situation in which I've said earlier, if 51% of miners are from the same group, they can actually have and hand over the entire blockchain. So they can actually manipulate the transactions that are getting happen in a blockchain. So what happens is that if there are around 100 people and more than 51 people are agreeing to a common pattern, நம்ம ஏற்கனவே சொன்ன மாதிரி அந்த பைசாண்டைன் ஜெனரல்ஸ் ப்ராப்ளமே கூட நீங்க எடுத்துக்கலாம். ஸோ 7 ஜெனரல் வந்து நீங்க அட்டாக் பண்ணுங்கன்னு சொல்லிட்டாங்கன்னா the decision will be going to attack. So what if all those are traitors? All those 7 people or all those 51 people are forcing the decision. So it can so happen that there is a situation of 51% security attack in blockchains also. So to avoid these attacks, there has been another consensus mechanism that is proposed. It is called as proof of stake. So with proof of stake, there are no actual miners in this consensus mechanism. What happens is that there are people called as validators who validate the transaction that happen in the blockchain. So அவங்க என்ன பண்ணுவாங்கன்னா who can actually validate the transaction? இதுதான் வந்து ரொம்ப முக்கியம். Only people who own more stakes or more bitcoins or more blocks can actually get the authority to become say a validator. So in the மாதிரி if somebody is allowed to approve the transaction based on their stakes or holdings, the algorithm proposed is called the proof of stake. நம்ம சேம் சொன்ன அந்த பைசாண்டைன் ஜெனரல் ப்ராப்ளமே எடுத்துக்கலாம். 12 ஜெனரல்ஸ்ல ஒரு 4 வந்து சீனியர் மெம்பர்ஸ் அப்படின்னா, so based on their experience they can be given a certain more additional responsibility for taking the decision. So this is a similar case. So proof of stake என்ன ensure பண்ணுனா the people who are actually owning more stakes in the Bitcoin are actually more experienced and they know how to validate the transaction. So this consensus mechanism is totally a different situation than the previous discussed proof of work. So proof of stake is also existing in certain Hyperledger frameworks like Sawtooth and so on. So this is one consensus mechanism. So there are also other kinds of consensus mechanisms that are being present. So there is a particular consensus mechanism called as proof of elapsed time. So proof of elapsed time actually is an hybrid of both what we saw earlier, proof of work and proof of stakes. So it actually combines the essence of both the previous mechanisms, and each validator will be assigned a wait time. Say if there are people who are competing to validate the particular transaction, they'll be randomly assigned wait times for their verification or validation process. So based on the random wait times, the person with the shortest wait time will be allowed to validate the transaction. So this is also one kind of consensus mechanism by which peace and harmony can be ensured in a blockchain environment. So as we have seen earlier, simplified Byzantine fault tolerance is the same mechanism that we have discussed earlier, because this actually works by the election principle. Say there are 100 users existing in a blockchain. 99 if 99 or more than 51% vote for the same validity of a block, it will be agreed that that particular block is a valid and it is a authenticated block. So the mathematical understanding is that if there are n number of faults, say, or f number of faults, since we have seen a tree, so 2f plus 1 nodes should reach the consensus when there are 3f plus 1 nodes in the system. So this is easily understood by substituting for f. Say if there are 3 nodes that are say if there are 4 nodes in the system, at least 3 nodes should reach the consensus. This is what is the basic requirement behind this fault tolerance mechanism. So moving on to the next one, proof of authority. So proof of authority is similar to the proof of stake that we have mentioned earlier, but only varies in a way that the authority of the user determines the role of the user. நம்ம ஏற்கனவே பார்த்தோம் ஸ்டேக்ஸ் proof of stakes என்ன பார்த்தோம்னா the user with more stakes will be allowed to validate the transactions பார்த்தோம். Proof of authority la the person who has the highest authority will be allowed to validate the transaction. So this is how proof of authority works. So this proof of authority can only be placed in a permission blockchain. ஏன்னா அப்பதான் வந்து we come to know the role of the user in that organization. So permission and private blockchains la da proof of authority வந்து is applicable. So these are the 5 most important consensus mechanisms that are till date being utilized in various blockchain frameworks. So there is still a lot of research going in this area, like how to improve the consensus mechanism in a blockchain. So if you are eagerly or looking forward to do a research in this particular blockchain domain, I would recommend you that you could read all the consensus mechanisms, what is fundamentally parallel and distributed computing, and stuff like that, so that you can understand consensus better, even more better. So moving on to the next part of our discussion. So having seen or having known about the blockchains and having known that Bitcoin is a familiar application of blockchain, so I've been mentioning that not only that Bitcoin is a blockchain, so there are other type of applications of blockchain also. So let's explore some of that. So moving on to the different use cases. So as we have seen already, cryptocurrencies help in payment processing and money transfers. So apart from that, we also have blockchains deployed in supply chains. So you might be wondering, most of you might know what is a supply chain, and some of you don't know. So some of you might not know. So I'll give a brief to the what is a supply chain. So a supply chain is something that exists in a e-commerce system. Say நம்ம இப்போ ஃபிளிப்கார்ட்ல ஏதோ ஒரு பொருள் வாங்குறோம், இல்ல we are buying a product from Amazon, அந்த மாதிரி there is a situation. So not that a guy from Amazon delivers the product actually. So it can happen with Amazon, but not with other e-commerce sites. So we'll get from some other person, like delivery or some other companies, Blue Dart, some other courier companies. So what happens is that there is a sequence of steps involved in your receiving the products. Say there is a shipping procedure, and there is a transportation of that particular product from the shipping area to your very own residence. So there are a sequence of steps involved. So this chain of sequence of intermediaries in delivering your product are called the supply chain. So what happens is that the company has to track the entire supply chain through which your product is delivered. So there are many intermediaries involved. So eliminating those intermediaries is I won't say is a very must, but you can eliminate that intermediaries with your very own blockchain system. So there is a blockchain that takes care of all the sequences of steps that are being followed. You don't have to track the entire system. You can be with the system, and the blockchain takes care of all the status queues of the particular product. Say if a particular product is shipped, then the blockchain notifies that the particular product will be shipped. So you can reinforce this or engineer this blockchain with the supply chain so as to utilize it. So there are companies like Consensus, Provenance, SKU Chain. You might not have known that, but yes, there are certain companies that are empowering blockchains for supply chains also. So similarly, like supply chains, we also have other applications too. Say intellectual property rights can be protected through blockchains, electronic voting, tax regulation, legal compliances, etc. So these are all the famous use cases of blockchains. What happened in Dubai was they've decided in 2019 that all of their governmental operations and their record maintenance, etc., all that comes under the government should be engineered into a blockchain, so that there is a track of everything. Say நம்மள்ட்ட இப்ப ஆதார் இருக்கு. What it happens is Aadhaar issues a PDF which is logged. ஆனா வந்து இப்போ if there is a blockchain system that empowers the Aadhaar, there is there is a easier chance that you can nobody can force your identity. Say இப்போ நான் வந்து அந்த PDF download பண்ணி I can't force my identity with yours. So this kind of vision was made by Dubai, and they are planning to actually migrate all their chains of works into blockchains. So some of those are automatic traffic light systems. So அதுக்கப்புறம் வந்து citizenship registration இந்த மாதிரி எல்லா ப்ராசஸுமே they are planning to migrate to blockchains. So moving apart, scope for research, as I've said earlier, there is a great and vast scope that you can do research in the consensus part. Apart from the consensus, there's also a thing called as double spending. Double spending na என்ன situation அப்படின்னா, இப்போ நான் ஒரு user X, நான் என்ன பண்றேன்னா I'm sending the same money to the person Y and to the person Z at the same time, so that I can forge my money into two different entities. Say if I own only one Bitcoin and I am forging two people with the same amount, it happens that two people accept that payment, and everybody I can cheat both of them. So this is called as double spending. So blockchain inherently eliminates that particular problem, but there is also a advanced research going in this double spending to ensure that there is no double spending even happens in the blockchain also. So moving on to the next slide, we have anti-money laundering. For anti-money laundering, there is an interesting fact that the anti-money laundering makes up to 2 to 5% of global GDP, which is $2 trillion, US dollars. So actually, anti-money laundering is an extension of this double spending problem. In a case where you actually make or launder the black money into a white money. So நான் என்ன பண்ணுவேன்னா, I'll be accounting the black money as a spent stuff. So what it happens is I can force my black money, or I can transact my black money through the blockchain and make it white or legal money. So this is called as anti-money laundering. There is a vast amount of research going in anti-money laundering prevention. So you can contribute to that also. So apart from these, there is an innovative or called as interesting thing called as multi-party synchronization. So this happens when there is a international transaction or something like that happens. So whenever an international transaction is happening, as you can see here, I'm a particular user sending from this US bank to that Japanese bank. There are a lot of intermediary banks through which I can send my money actually. So these multiple parties involved in the transaction process should be eliminated, because there can be a chance that the influence of these multiple parties will influence the blockchain. So there is a similar kind of vast research going in this multi-party synchronization also. So if you can contribute, you can learn yourself. So moving to the hands-on session. So the Ethereum. So if somebody know what's Ethereum, it's okay, but I'm saying for the people who don't know actually. So Ethereum is a particular blockchain framework which is open sourced, permissionless, and etc. So it is empowered by a particular programming language called the Solidity. So how Solidity actually looks is like, so this is one Solidity code I've looked into for voting system. So it looks similar to Java program, maybe can associate, if you can associate with that. So but it has its own particular keywords and stuff to program the smart contract. So these solidity language programs are used to reinforce the rules on top of the blockchain. So those rules were called the smart contracts earlier. So நம்ம அந்த smart contracts வந்து if we have to deploy it on the top of the blockchain, we'll use this solidity files or solidity programs. So this is the programming language associated with Ethereum. So apart from that, we have a framework called as Truffle. So Truffle is one framework that lets you utilize this Solidity program or smart contract and deploy it on top of your blockchain and actually utilize this as a web service or something like with an interactive UI. So this particular development environment, Truffle, would help you in actually in developing your decentralized application yourself. So this Truffle helps you that way. And Ganesh is a tool that is a that is specific to the very own system, like the ledger that I've said earlier. So it lies within our system and it tracks the balance of each account or each private key or each block, uh, uh, which can also be utilized for the development purposes only. So you can see here that this particular account has a private key of this, as I've said earlier. So the miners will be competing to solve this particular private key and earn their rewards. So this is what it happens. So apart from these, I have to connect to the internet so that everybody in the blockchain environment knows that I've been holding up this particular ledger. So what happens is that there is a meta service called as MetaMask through which you can actually connect to the network. So this is what it looks like. You can it is available as a Chrome extension. You can download it and you can connect it to multiple Ethereum test networks. So if you are going to the website like blockchain website, sorry, Bitcoin website or something like a blockchain application website, it will automatically ask you to connect your wallet to that particular system. So this is your wallet, Ganesh, and this MetaMask is what it connects with the main Ethereum network. So these are the some of the frameworks that you can use to build your decentralized application and utilize it. So that's all for the day. I'm done. So I've received a question from Jennifer. Is this in practice now? Yeah, Bitcoin is actually in practice now. You can actually buy a Bitcoin. So, and Sivakumar has asked example of practical cryptocurrencies other than Bitcoin. So yeah, I've had a slide on that too. Sorry for not mentioning that. So these are other types of cryptocurrencies that are similar to Bitcoin, but in a way, but or can be different too. So Litecoin is something that been launched by Facebook. So they are also investing their time to develop a cryptocurrency situation with blockchains, and Litecoin is the name of that franchise. So Monisha has asked, which is the safest money transaction method? So if you're concerned with the security of your money, I would say blockchains or bitcoins or cryptocurrencies are the most safest forms of transactions available now. But yes, if you're concerned with your difficulties in investing, so there will be attendance link provided in the description. So you can register in that Google form link for your attendance. So your certificates will be provided by the robotics. Thanks for listening to this webinar. And once again, I would like to thank members, all members, the Robotics Club for organizing this wonderful series of webinars. So uh, thanks, thanks everybody.